"Welcome, my slave," were the first words she said to me, even though she knew I was there to give my greetings to her family formally. I couldn't believe my ears and exclaimed in surprise. My fiancé's mother smiled while observing me closely. "Oh, with such a poor-looking expression, weren't you a slave after all?" Hearing this, Dylan, the husband I trusted, betrayed me unexpectedly. Glancing at my face, Dylan chuckled. "You look like a pauper. I'd like to see what your parents look like." Actually, well, they might faint if they came to a rich household like ours. Dylan and his mother continued to despise me. Unable to endure being insulted further, I discreetly sent a message to my father while they weren't looking. He immediately replied, "I'm on my way. I need to get some fresh air outside." I could no longer bear listening to Dylan and the other slanders. "Ashley, don't run away." Dylan's unpleasant laughter echoed. I left the table and decided to wait for my father's arrival. Just 10 minutes later. What? Tony's mother, who should have known my father, was shocked and stiffened her face. "I am Ashley White. I turned 30 this year. I work as a clerical worker at a small company called Simpson Machinery, and I've lived inconspicuously until now. Therefore, I don't wear flashy makeup, just basic cosmetics, and I choose clothes mainly in navy or black. I wear glasses with strong, thick lenses. The reason I've been so thorough is as follows. My father has a noticeable job, and I've been influenced by it since I was a child. He is an actor. He was very popular when he was young and was often surrounded by women when he went out, as I've heard. He frequently appears on TV, often in supporting roles, and has a certain level of fame. In middle school, I faced many difficulties because of my father. Classmates would ask for his autograph, and their parents would pressure me to meet him. Because I refused these demands, I was often criticized. I was seen as crafty. I also experienced harassment from classmates who envied me. I didn't want to trouble my father, nor did I want to be seen as boasting by those around me. To solve this problem, I intentionally dressed plainly and went to a high school where no one knew me. Fortunately, the name White is very common, and I was able to lead a normal life in high school. Thanks to my modest appearance, men didn't approach me, so I could spend my school days without worries. I love talking about cartoons with my friends, and that's when I feel happiest. I was inexperienced in love when I met my fiancé, Dylan, at work. Dylan works for a company that handles leasing for copiers, which are frequently used at my workplace, and we didn't have many interactions. He would come periodically to maintain the copiers and occasionally exchange greetings. Our relationship changed the day the copier broke down. That day, I was working hard from early morning to prepare documents for a meeting the next day. However, during my work, the copier suddenly stopped. I was at a loss. Without it, I wouldn't be able to prepare for the meeting in time. So I quickly contacted Dylan. He promptly came over and started checking the copier. "Can you fix it?" I asked worriedly. And Dylan replied with a smile, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." At that moment, I was captivated by Dylan's smile. Eventually, the copier couldn't be fixed, but Dylan arranged for a replacement machine. Thanks to that, the documents were completed in time, and the meeting went smoothly. Attracted to Dylan, I continued to approach him. I asked for his phone number and frequently contacted him. Finally, I confessed to Dylan, and we started dating. Dylan was very kind during our relationship, always showing consideration. I never saw him angry. I felt that even if he knew the real me, he would continue to treat me warmly. With that thought, I boldly proposed to Dylan 3 months after we started dating. He immediately accepted, and I was truly happy with his response. However, there was one thing that worried me. It was about my appearance. I had worn thick glasses for a long time. Even on dates, I always chose modest clothes. It was a long-standing habit that was hard to change. In reality, I look very much like my father. With distinct facial features, I was often envied by girls during middle school. Boys also judged me by my appearance, leading to painful experiences. But with Dylan, I thought there would surely be no problem. Going forward, especially for the sake of my beloved Dylan, I had been contemplating changing my appearance gradually. I kept this thought to myself, but after our engagement, I started feeling increasingly uneasy. Dylan had seemed very kind before our engagement, but lately he had begun to look down on me with disdainful words and actions. Recently, we went to a bridal fair to decide on a venue for our wedding. The suggestion came from Dylan, and I went there at his invitation. The place he took me to was a glamorous world. It was a luxurious guest house suitable for a large wedding with over 100 guests. Seeing this, I could not hide my surprise. Since my student days, I have had few close friends, and I wanted to avoid standing out, so I had hoped for a wedding at a small venue. Honestly, I wanted to leave immediately. However, Dylan was enjoying the moment, and I couldn't say anything. Thus, I endured the time patiently. After the tour of the wedding venues, we took a break at a cafe. Dylan was in a very good mood. The wedding venue we just saw was wonderful. Personally, I prefer a more glamorous ceremony, Dylan said while drinking his coffee. It seemed like we might end up choosing the earlier venue. In a hurry, I expressed my desire for the type of ceremony I wanted. I think a quiet ceremony wouldn't be bad either. I especially don't like standing out. I believed that the kind Dylan would listen to my wish. However, that was not the reality. Dylan glanced at me and laughed mockingly. Indeed, for someone modest like you, a flashy ceremony like that might not be suitable. Besides, is there even a dress that would fit your thick glasses? What I was puzzled by his words. But a wedding is about uniting families. My family is wealthy, and we need to have a ceremony of a certain standard. I was at a loss for words. The once gentle Dylan had suddenly started to look down on me. This change deeply hurt me. And to my confused self, Dylan added more cutting remarks. You should just keep quiet and follow my instructions. You should be grateful that someone plain like you can marry me. Dylan said this suddenly with a serious expression. I was speechless. Dylan's cold expression even made me feel scared. However, right after that, Dylan said with a smile, I'll decide everything. You just need to say yes and follow me. Got it? Yes? I didn't know how to respond and could only smile in confusion. Maybe my engagement to Dylan was a mistake. But now, it's too late to change the past. I have already announced our marriage plans to my workplace and parents. Still, I continue to love Dylan. Perhaps the kind Dylan I knew before the engagement will return someday. Nevertheless, Dylan continued with his harsh words. Each time, my heart was slowly getting hurt. Still, I couldn't bring myself to dislike Dylan. Even when I think about separating from Dylan, memories of the kind Dylan remain in my heart. I still deeply love Dylan. Confused, I continued our engagement. Then one day something happened that confused me even more. It was the day Dylan made formal arrangements at the wedding venue. After visiting several venues, Dylan chose the luxurious guest house we first visited. He confidently declared, after all, a luxurious ceremony suits me. It might be a bit too much for you, though. Dylan laughed, hurting my heart. After that, we headed to that guest house to proceed with the wedding venue arrangements. On the way, I encountered an unexpected person. Dylan. Mom, why are you here? Dylan was surprised to see her. Then, Dylan introduced her to me. Ashley, this is my mother. Mom, this is Ashley White, my fiancée I've told you about. His mother greeted me with a smile. So, you're Dylan's fiancée. You seem very serious. Where do you work? It must surely be a top company. This meeting was my first encounter with her. I replied nervously, I work in a clerical position at Simpson Machinery. Upon hearing this, she looked puzzled. Simpson Machinery? Where is that? Dylan joined the conversation. Simpson Machinery is one of my clients, a small company with about 30 employees. It's no wonder you don't know it. Hearing Dylan's explanation, she frowned. I thought your fiancé would be working at a more prestigious company. Such a small company doesn't pay much, does it? Are you planning to trouble Dylan? I'm sorry. Indeed, I don't earn a high salary at my current job. Therefore, I had no choice but to apologize to her. She took a deep breath and said, Anyway, I want you to stop depending on Dylan. Our family has a long history. We can't have someone of unknown origin troubling us. Yes. While I nodded in confusion at her words, she grew more heated and continued, First of all, what kind of people are your parents? Do they work for a reputable company? She interrogated me angrily. My father is. As I hesitated to answer, My eyes were drawn to her purse because there was a familiar item on it. Seeing me silent, Dylan spoke up. "Mom, calm down. We'll soon bring Ashley over for a formal introduction." "Well, I'm not particularly looking forward to it." She glared at me unhappily. Apparently, her first impression of me was very poor. The path to marriage seemed more difficult than I had thought, and I quietly sighed. Then, the day of the family dinner arrived. Wow. Standing in front of Dylan's family home, I was amazed and murmured. The view was beyond my imagination. Since his mother had mentioned a noble lineage, I knew Dylan's family was wealthy. But the reality was beyond my imagination. There was a large automatic gate and even an elevator installed inside the house. Outside, there were more than 10 luxury cars lined up, most of them foreign cars. This was probably his father's hobby. Dylan began speaking to me in a light tone. "My father isn't home today because of work. It's just Mom, so everything will be as usual." Even though Dylan was smiling, my expression stiffened because of the harsh words I had received from her before. I was sure I would receive some kind of sarcasm today as well. With that anxiety, I followed Dylan to the living room where his mother was waiting. "Excuse us, about the other day." I said this to her. Right after that, she uttered an unbelievable phrase. "Welcome, my slave." Knowing that I was coming to give my greeting to her family formally, these were the first words she said. I couldn't believe my ears and exclaimed in surprise. She smiled while observing me closely. "Oh? With such a poor-looking expression, weren't you a slave after all? I just needed someone I could use for free." "What do you mean by slave?" Her words were painful to hear. Then she burst out laughing gleefully. "I heard from Dylan. He said it's okay to treat you like a slave. It seems Dylan just wanted a submissive person to marry. Poor you." "Dylan, what is this?" Shocked, I questioned Dylan. This must be a joke. I wanted to believe it was. However, Dylan, who was supposed to support me, showed an unbelievable betrayal. Glancing at my face, Dylan chuckled. "You look like a pauper. I'd like to see what your parents look like." Saying this, Dylan continued laughing loudly. "Having someone to obey me unconditionally is attractive, isn't it? Anyway, if your parents come to a wealthy household like ours, they would probably faint." Dylan and his mother continued to despise me. Then she threw a malicious question with a sneer. "By the way, what kind of job does your father have? He's not unemployed, is he?" "There's no way." Dylan responded to his mother while laughing loudly. "Mom, that's not even a job. It's clear Ashley's parents don't have a regular job." "Oh, I'm laughing so hard it hurts." Dylan and his mother continued to look down on my parents. They made assumptions about their low education and modest appearance. I was furious and gritted my teeth as I listened to their words. I could not tolerate their disrespectful attitude. Being insulted like this was more than I could bear. Unnoticed by them, I secretly sent a message to my father. "Please come right now." As I sent the message, I also sent my father the map I had previously received from Dylan. Today was supposed to be my father's day off. He would be relaxing. Fortunately, my father replied immediately, "I'm on my way." Seeing my father's reply, I felt a bit relieved. Then, I addressed Dylan and his mother. "I need to get some fresh air outside." I could no longer endure their cutting words. I decided to wait quietly outside until my father arrived. It was at that moment. "That's good then. Now, Dylan, let's continue our coffee, just the two of us." She seemed pleased to be alone with Dylan. "Ashley, don't run away." Dylan's loud laughter echoed as I left the scene and waited for my father. 10 minutes later, my father appeared, wearing dark sunglasses. "Ashley, what's wrong? Weren't you supposed to be at your fiance's house for a marriage greeting today? I was surprised when you suddenly called me," my father asked with a puzzled expression. "Dad, I can't take it anymore." Hearing those words, I was relieved and began to cry. The tears wouldn't stop. "What happened, Ashley?" My father started to panic seeing me cry. I told him everything that had happened, how Dylan's behavior had changed after our engagement, and how his mother had conspired to demean me. "It's unbearable to hear them mock you even though they didn't even know you," I said through my tears. My father listened quietly to my story, a calm anger visible on his face. Then, I told him something about Dylan's mother. At that moment, my father chuckled softly, took off his sunglasses, and handed them to me. "Let's go inside. It's time to make those who hurt you regret their actions," he said. With these words, I firmed up my resolve. My feelings for Dylan had completely vanished, replaced only by a desire for revenge. "I've made up my mind too. I will definitely make them regret this," I declared as I put on the sunglasses my father handed me. We then headed back inside Dylan's family home. Appearing before them, my father and I stood confidently. "We've kept you waiting," I announced with the sunglasses on, and Dylan looked bewildered. "Why the sunglasses all of a sudden?" he asked, unable to hide his confusion. His mother, who had been smiling slyly at first, was shocked to see my father beside me. It was the first time I saw someone freeze in shock. She might have been planning to say something when I returned, but her plans were thwarted. I was ready to push her into an abyss of regret. She must have already known the true identity of my father. My father quietly addressed her. "So, I'm the father of the slave." His voice was calm, but there was no smile in his eyes, and his handsome features seemed even more imposing. "What?" his mother exclaimed, surprised. Seeing my father, her face stiffened in astonishment. Why is Tony here? Is this some kind of joke?" She was clearly flustered. Her cheeks tinged slightly red, and she even looked somewhat pleased. Her eyes sparkled, almost like those of a young girl. Dylan was too stunned to grasp the situation. Without responding to her question, my father simply observed Dylan and his mother. She met my father's gaze and seemed embarrassed, which looked rather comical. I observed the scene calmly. Then, a slightly composed Dylan asked Tony, "Is he an acquaintance of yours, Mom?" It seemed Dylan was not yet aware of who my father was. My father was quite well known among his mother's generation, but perhaps not so much among the younger ones. At that moment, she gave Dylan a stern look. "Dylan, don't say such disrespectful things. This is Tony White, a famous actor, and my first love." "Really?" Dylan responded incredulously. Ace's mother quickly turned back to my father, smiling joyfully. "I'm a huge fan of yours, Tony. Look at this." She hurriedly pulled something from her bag and showed it to my father. "This is a keychain I got from your fan club. Actually, I've been a huge fan of yours for many years." She declared her enthusiastic fandom to my father. "Mom." Dylan was baffled by her sudden change. She continued to talk eagerly to my father, clearly excited to have her favorite actor right in front of her. However, my father's expression as he watched her was very stern. Then, breaking his silence, he finally spoke. "I understand you are a fan of mine. However, it's true that you tried to treat my daughter, Ashley, like a slave, isn't it?" "What?" She was taken aback by this sudden reference to reality, and her expression changed dramatically. Her face paled with fear, and her body started to tremble slightly. Ignoring that, my father continued sternly. "Moreover, it is extremely rude to label someone you have never met as unemployed." At my father's words, she began to visibly shake. "No, that's... I didn't know that you're Ashley's father, Tony. If I had known, I would have truly welcomed him into the family, right, Dylan?" Yes." Dylan seemed pressured by his mother's insistence. Meanwhile, she was desperately making excuses to my father. I was dismayed by the scene. Until my father arrived, she had looked down on both my father and me, but she completely changed her attitude upon seeing him. I could only feel disappointed by her contradictory behavior. "Upon closer inspection, Ashley does resemble you and is very attractive. My earlier words were just out of jealousy, fearing that my son might be taken away. If I had known it was you, Tony, I would have shown much more respect." She was desperately trying to make a good impression on my father. My father could hardly hide his irritation at her behavior. Witnessing the exchange, I made my decision. I could not let my father bear this burden any longer. I had to resolve this issue myself. So I declared to her, "This ends my engagement with Dylan. I will not become part of your family." "What?" "Ashley, please forgive my unfortunate words. I can't bear the thought of losing the chance to be a family with Tony. Please reconsider." She tried to persuade me while holding back tears, but given her past behavior, I couldn't trust her words. I calmly looked back at her. However, She seemed to still hope that I might change my mind. She turned to me and smiled warmly. Ashley, you do want to marry Dylan, don't you? From now on, I won't oppose it, and there's no need to worry. I will accept anything about you. She was frantically appealing for a family with my father and me, despite her previous statements. Her willingness to agree to anything now was completely opposite to her earlier words. I even felt contempt for her as she kept changing her stance. I said quietly, I refuse. What did you say? She seemed unable to catch my words and tilted her head. Then, I said more clearly and forcefully, I absolutely do not want to be a part of your family. What did you say? She was startled by my loud voice and looked confused. I confronted her with the depth of my feelings. All you did was disparage the place where I work, right? And you said horrible things about my father too. I can't forgive that. I made my feelings clear to her. She realized it was futile to persuade me further and turned to look at my father. She then started speaking kindly to him. Ashley says so, but, Tony, you also wish for your daughter's happiness, right? We have assets, and she can be happy with us. Certainly, some people think that money can buy happiness. But my view is different. Perhaps sensing my feelings, my father voiced his opposition. Ashley values love more than money, and don't worry, our family has sufficient funds. I earn a decent income as an actor. She was at a loss for words. It's no wonder, given that my father is a well-known actor who appears frequently in dramas. He earns a significant income and we are not financially struggling. Our family is wealthy, so we do not see the value in a marriage based only on money. Perhaps realizing this fact, she fell silent. She probably couldn't think of another strategy. My father broke the silence and continued, I know you say you're a fan of mine, but I dislike anyone who makes my precious daughter sad. Please don't claim to be a fan anymore. She started to cry under my father's stern gaze. I can't go on living if you dislike me, Tony. At this point, Dylan, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Don't think you can say whatever you want. Ashley, if you break off our engagement, you'll regret it. An ordinary woman like you won't be sought after by anyone. Dylan laughed mockingly. Hey, Dylan. Stop it. His mother tried to intervene in front of my father. But Dylan was not inclined to stop. I chose someone submissive like you from the beginning because I wanted a woman like a slave. I planned to have fun with other attractive women after getting married. How frustrating. He rambled on about things no one asked him to. Clearly, Dylan had no love for me. He just wanted to marry a woman who would be convenient for him. My love for Dylan had already disappeared. As these thoughts crossed my mind, Dylan continued his self-centered ramblings. You. My father clenched his teeth, looking like he might attack Dylan at any moment. This was my chance to fight back. Dad, just wait. Saying that, I stopped my father. I smiled slightly while still wearing my sunglasses. What's the matter? Dylan seemed unsettled by my composed smile. Do you still think I'm plain? As I spoke, I swiftly removed the sunglasses I was wearing, which belonged to my father. What? Dylan stared at my face in shock. His surprise was understandable. With the sunglasses off, I was fully made up. Normally, I only wear foundation, but at that time I had also applied eyeshadow, mascara, and eyeliner. In fact, this makeup was done right after my father arrived and I had shed some tears. It was just eye makeup, but it dramatically transformed my appearance. Is this the real you? Dylan's face turned slightly red. He must have been enchanted, staring at my face, which now stood out with makeup. Yes, exactly. I used to downplay my appearance because I didn't want to stand out, but I'm done hiding. Up until now, I had unconsciously stood out because of my father's influence. That's why I had intentionally behaved modestly. However, this resulted in Dylan and his mother criticizing me and my father. I decided that standing out a bit wasn't so bad if it meant not demeaning my father. That was my thought. Dylan, his face flushed, said, If you had been like this from the beginning, I would have been nicer to you. We can still repair our relationship. Let's call off the engagement cancellation right now. And, while we're at it, introduce me to some beautiful actresses through your father. Why should I call off the engagement cancellation now? Moreover, he audaciously requested to be introduced to actresses. I firmly told Dylan, The engagement is already a done deal. I no longer need you in my life. By the way, I've already canceled the reservation for the wedding venue." "What?" Dylan was stunned and lost for words. But I wasn't done yet. I pushed Dylan even further. "Of course, you should be the one to pay the cancellation fees for the wedding venue. It's only fair since you're the reason for the engagement breakup." His mother cried out in confusion. "Wait a minute. It's too much for him to bear the entire cost." Dylan, looking shocked, was unable to argue. At that moment, my father chimed in. "Shouldn't Dylan's father be the one to pay? He owns luxury cars, so it should be easy for him," my father suggested brightly with a laugh. Here, I used my last card. "If you're not satisfied, we can consider going to court. However, my father is a famous actor, and the news might provoke reactions from his passionate fans. My father has many ardent fans. Once, a critic who spoke ill of him faced severe consequences. Threatening phone calls and letters containing blades were just some of the impacts, which were significant. The incident was widely reported at the time. Remembering that, his mother's face turned pale. She desperately continued to persuade Dylan, "You should bear all the costs of the cancellation. Can you imagine what might happen otherwise?" Seeing his mother's expression, Dylan seemed to realize the severity of the situation. "Really?" Dylan collapsed to his knees, filled with despair. Dylan was no longer necessary in my life. "Let's go home, Dad." I left the scene with my father while glancing sideways at the slumped Dylan and his mother. As a result, my engagement with Dylan was dissolved. Dylan ended up paying all the cancellation fees for the wedding. His father is actually the president of a major company, and my father once appeared in advertisements for that company. Through this connection, my father reported the current situation to Dylan's father. Unaware of the ongoing events, he was furious. He then severely questioned Dylan and his wife. He strongly demanded that Dylan bear the full cost of the wedding cancellation fees. As a result, Dylan had to pay a huge amount. This also affected his mother. Due to her excessive spending and her treatment of us, Dylan's father declared divorce. She had been spending a lot on her fan activities for my father. The funds were coming out of her husband's pocket. He had also lost his love for her. In addition, my father exposed a passionate love letter she had sent him. "I want to get divorced and be with you, Tony. My current husband is just a source of money." Such words were written in the love letter addressed to my father, which triggered the outrage of Dylan's father. Though she showed resistance, the divorce was finalized through a lawyer. I heard rumors that she was crying, saying, "This is not what I expected." She was also expelled from my father's fan club. She had often been a nuisance before, and the expulsion seemed justified. After losing everything, it's unlikely that she will ever be happy again. I feel this is a result of her own making. Half a year later, Dylan was arrested due to his obsession with me. He couldn't forget the sight of me without my sunglasses and started showing up persistently. Even after resigning, he continued to wait outside my home and tried to contact me persistently. "Please be engaged with me again. I can't live without you," he pleaded tearfully over the phone, even though he only saw my real appearance briefly. He was surprised by the difference between my look before and after makeup, but I have no need for such a shallow man. I politely refused and cut off all further contact. However, Dylan's behavior intensified, and I consulted the police. I felt genuinely threatened, so after much distress, I ultimately decided to file a police report. My father agreed with this decision. Eventually, an incident occurred where Dylan forcefully entered our home, and he was arrested. As a result of the arrest, I heard that Dylan lost his job. Now all he has are his significant debts. His future will likely be challenging, probably because of his habit of looking down on others. This is truly poetic justice. Afterwards, I took a job as my father's manager. Unlike my previous clerical role, I faced many challenges. I manage my father's schedule, handle greetings and responses at sites, and sometimes negotiate salaries. I used to commute between the office and home, spending most of my time in front of a computer, but now my work primarily involves interacting with people. These days are completely different from my past experiences, but I find them very enjoyable. The job of a manager is glamorous, but that's not all there is to it. My main role is to support my father so he can focus on his acting. The working hours are irregular, requiring flexibility. Above all, the best part of this job is being able to support my father up close. To dispel previous worries, I want to give back. This new job is just beginning, and many challenges await. Nevertheless, I am continuing to work positively, spending my days by my